was telling you earlier, Chris, I remembered hearing your name on one of the Dan Kennedy sessions from like 15 or 20 years ago. And I was like, wait a second, is that Chris Hurn? The Chris Hurn I know.
Right.
So you were there. So you're obviously into direct response. It's been a part of you building businesses. How did you get into that?
How I got into it was, you probably remember this in the 90s, there was these like big arena events. I can't remember what it was called, where they'd like bring in like Norman Schwarzkopf, who would be a speaker, and they'd have, what's the guy's name? Gosh, if I say his name, you would know him. You know, they didn't have like Tony Robbins level, but close to that. And Dan was one of them. And Dan was at the very end, which I found out later, he actually asked for that. And he came on classically, and of course, all this is scripted, knowing Dan. He did this to the letter. He basically said it was at the end of the day, everybody's leaving, they've been motivated, all this stuff. Victor Hansen was one of the guys, a bunch of these guys. And you're getting out of your seat in the arena to leave, and he's like, so he said something like, if you would just sit down, I know you want to go to the parking lot, it's going to be crowded, you're not going to, just hear me out. And he said a few things that like made it very relatable, and you're like, okay, that's kind of bold. All right, let me sit back down and hear what this guy has to say. And he basically came from a place of, you're not running your business, you're running your business, you're not in the business of running your business, you're in the business of marketing your business so that you get more business. And what I mean by that is, most people you talk to, hi, I'm a dentist. No, you really need to change your mindset to you're in the marketing of your dental practice. And that really resonated with me. And so at the end, of course, it was one of these pitches to buy his product, and it was cassette tapes back in the day and everything, and it was terribly produced. I mean,
the worst.
It was the worst. And it was like $300 for this.
They have some like crooked printouts with it, like photocopied 70 times.
If you know Dan, he was never about like things being slick and anything like that. He just kind of threw it together. But it was like $300 to buy this, and this is back in the mid 90s, and that was a lot of money for me at the time. But I went ahead and did it, and my wife was not happy later. But then it sat in my closet, classically, which is a lot of people do this.
I think it has to. It's got a season for a while.
It's got to marinate. That's right. And eventually, I blew off the dust, and I listened to this stuff, and I'm like, this is genius. And between that and I think it was Jay Abraham.
Oh yeah.
Like, that revolutionized my thinking about what I did, whether it was as a management consultant, working for Marsh & McLennan, or when I had my own companies, whether it's Mercantile, Fountainhead, or now Community Bank Shares. And I never once took a marketing course. I've got 2 bachelor degrees. I've got a master's degree from Wharton. Never once took a marketing class, but I'm smart enough to try to become self-taught about things. And Dan was a sort of a cornerstone of that for me. And I learned about direct response marketing. My first business that I had in the finance industry, which was Mercantile, we were the first ones to have an actual website that was direct response. That wasn't just brochureware, is what I called it back in the day. I was also the first one to ever have a video blog, not just a blog, but actually a video blog on camera. I was the first one to have an SBA podcast, and it's called what is it called? SBA Loan Experts.
Sounds super exciting.
Yeah, it was the top podcast in our industry until I stopped doing it about a year ago while we were sort of winding down Fountainhead. And so I haven't gotten back to it, but I hope to get back to it at some point. But just all these different things. When we go to a lot of conferences as a company, I don't go to as much anymore because if I go, I want to be a speaker. And obviously I've been a speaker at a lot of stuff, but like we have a whole strategy about how to go to a conference, how to maximize what we get out of the conference, whether it's pre-marketing, pre-conference marketing, post-conference marketing, the deliverables that we get, how we push for extra deliverables that maybe aren't on the card, all these different speaking opportunities so that we can be what I call omnipresent. You want to do all sorts of things. Everybody, and I've taught entrepreneurs this stuff over the years. I've done some coaching for entrepreneurs, and everybody wants that one silver bullet, that one thing. And the reality is there's not one thing, which makes it difficult because everybody, especially in the direct response world, they want to say, well, I did this, I ran this ad and I pushed them to this custom 800 number and look at our response.
Yeah.
The problem is that's just one aspect to all this. You've got to be kind of everywhere all at once. And it's frustrating because if you're a data cruncher, you don't really know what particular marketing thing tipped them over.
Talk about this in our business all
but
the
you
time.
got to do all of this stuff.
And like some folks in my business and my company here in Puerto Rico will say, well, wait a second, this is what's working because this is where we're actually getting the responses from, but how did they actually get to that? Like, it's like you said, you got to be omnipresent.
Like we do weekly emails. We take the email content and 80% of it's the same, but that 20% we've customized it for a particular segment of our database.
Yeah.
For instance, I also write articles. I've written for Forbes for years. I do TV interviews, and we repurpose that stuff. So if I write something for Forbes, I also push it out on my blog. Yep. We also might do a podcast about it. If I'm on Fox News or CNBC, we'll also distribute it across multiple other of our channels. We'll do social media. We do all these different things. We do a lot of SEO work, organic search engine. We do a lot of pay-per-click ads. We do some complicated marketing things where we've got a specific target audience that we're able to get information from or send information to, but we have multi-steps. You and I were talking before we came on camera about, sending the old FedEx package.
Yeah.
People initially, their reaction is, oh, shoot, that cost me, $20, $25 to send it. Yeah, but that's almost assuredly going to get in front of the decision maker.
They will open another 1,000 that don't actually arrive.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, you can send out 10,000 pieces of mail, and unfortunately, a lot of people think if it's one and done, right? I send an envelope out to them, they should respond to me, or I send an email, they should respond to me. What people don't realize is it's a sequence of things, and it's the follow-up that makes the difference. You might only get a 1% response from that first touch. But if you're consistent and you make it relevant to them, you might get a 2% on the second touch. You might get a 3% on the third touch. You don't really know, again, what is the thing that tipped them over. Mm-hmm. But you got to look at it like that. I think of, and again, I learned this from Dan. Marketing is about relatability and numbers. You want to try to be able to communicate to that target in a way that they understand, to make it interesting. How do you stand out in the clutter, basically? And then it's all about numbers in terms of how do you keep touching them? How do you keep arriving in front of them? How do you stay top of mind consciousness? And it takes effort, and it takes doing all these different things. It's not just one simple thing. If I just do this one thing, it solves everything. It might for a little while, but probably not going to continue forever.